Because it's awesome, I'm going to tell you all about the livestock trough that I have turned into a goldfish tank. Or I suppose you could call it a container pond. I've been dreaming about this setup for 20 years and now it's finally real. Meet George and Gracie. Yes, that's a Star Trek 4 joke. No, I'm not going to eat them, though before we're done here, we will talk about why people don't eat goldfish. If you're here from aquarium YouTube, just know that you have stumbled into food YouTube. I normally talk about food, so people are going to ask whether or not I'm going to eat them. I'm not going to eat them. But I do consider my fish trough to be a proof of concept model for a future aquaponics system in here for growing vegetables. We're going to talk more about that. But first, let me tell you about my beautiful Goldfish Aquascape and how it came to be. Ever since I was little, I've been fascinated by highly domesticated ornamental varieties of Asian or Eurasian carp, koi, and goldfish. Like many kids, I kept goldfish in little nano tanks, though we didn't call them nano tanks back then, we just called them tanks. This is my shrimp cube, by the way. And then when I was older, my dad, kind of on a lark, bought some koi for the pond that we had on our property where I grew up in central Pennsylvania. It was an old abandoned clay mine that had filled up with water, and he put some koi in there, and I can't imagine he figured they would do very well. It gets really cold, ice is over in the winter, but man, they loved it in there. They thrived, they got huge. And they were super mysterious because the water was so full of tannins from the rotting leaves. It was really dark and murky. You could hardly see these giant bright fish until they were right on top of you. It's kind of magical. And then my parents sold that house, God bless them, but I do think about those koi often. I hope they're doing well. Then in college, I kept this stupid fake tank with so-called fancy goldfish. I'm fully opposed to plastic tanks nowadays, but I did love those little buggers. Believe it or not, these are the best photos that I had. Digital cameras were not idiot-proof back then. And for context, this is me back then. As to why I'm wearing ladies' pajamas, my best guess is wine. But when I was learning how to care for those fancies in college, I came across a book by a gentleman named Richard Hess, who was a goldfish dealer up in Erie, Pennsylvania. Lovely guy. Rick Hess dealt in show-quality goldfish, like the kind that I own now. George and Gracie are ranchus, the king of goldfish. These are pictures Rick took of the fish that he sold. He's passed away now, but 20 years ago he was very sweet and he gave me permission to use his photos in this score that I wrote in college. It's a piece of chamber music called Types of Goldfish. My dear classmate Virginia Kim actually paid me money to compose this for her to play on her oboe with her friends. This is one of my favorite parts. It's from the movement that's about celestial goldfish, which always look up. And over here is the movement that I wrote about ranchus, the big fat ones that I have. They do not have dorsal fins. That's one reason they look like meaty baseballs. Anyway, this guy wrote that goofy piece of music about goldfish, and ever since then, he has been scheming a way to own his own show-quality goldfish himself. I really can't explain why they delight me so much. It's just another brilliant innovation from East Asia, much like Emmy, sponsor of this video. Get 15% off with my code Ragusia at emmyeats.com/Ragusia. Emmy is an absolutely delicious line of instant ramen packs with special noodles made chiefly of pumpkin seed protein rather than wheat starch. They have gluten, which gives them terrific chew, but with a protein-based noodle, you've got just 300 calories, 85% fewer carbs, and up to 22 grams of protein, which is about like a typical protein shake's worth of protein. And it has 18 grams of fiber, which is great for gut health. Boil it like any other ramen, maybe garnish with whatever fresh produce you want, and enjoy. Super savory broth, thanks in part to yeast extract, one of my favorite vegan ingredients. With way more protein and fewer carbs, Emmy is really conducive to my fitness goals while still really being a convenience food. Try lots of flavors. Get 15% off with my code Ragusia when you order at emmyeats.com/Ragusia. That's all in the description, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you, Emmy. Anyway, I'm not sure why I have long loved show-quality goldfish. Maybe it's because they're kind of like cows. Like cattle, goldfish and koi are hopelessly domesticated, and now they're just kind of friendly and soft and dumb. Ancient East Asians kept various species of carp as food fish, and every now and then a mutation produced fish with bright, shiny scales. At least as far back as the Jin Dynasty, like 4th century CE, people have kept these colorful carp for fun, and bred them to create a whole menagerie of characters. Koi here are much larger and longer and were domesticated in Japan from the common Eurasian carp, Cyprinus carpio. These smaller guys are goldfish, common goldfish, much closer to the original goldfish bred in China and Korea and such from members of the Carassius genus, which includes the Crucian carp, a popular food fish in Eastern Europe. The point is, goldfish are not natural. We bred them to live with us in our little homes, just like dogs. And Ranchu goldfish, like George and Gracie, are famous for their so-called puppy faces. I think they look more like anthropomorphic clouds with that fleshy head growth called a wen, but they do act like dogs. I can stick some flakes to my wet finger, and usually Gracie, the black one there, will eat right off of me, and it feels really weird. That's a good little fish. George, the orange and white one, is a little bit more shy. We'll get there, buddy. Anyway, I've never before had the means to establish my own goldfish tank that's big enough to, responsibly house show-quality goldfish. At least not until the whole YouTube thing happened, and I thank you very much for that. We bought a house in Tennessee that already had a koi pond in the back. A childhood dream of mine come true, though then I had to completely rebuild it because it leaked. I liked rebuilding it though, and I created a little cove off to the side where smaller fish would feel safe. There's a thriving breeding population of mosquito fish in here, and I put some common goldfish in here too. They were all an inch long, tops, when I bought them. That black one I call Shark, and he almost never leaves that little cave. The rest of these almost never venture outside Little Fish Cove, and they're noticeably smaller than the common goldfish that chose to swim in Gen Pop, like Redcap there. That's a goldfish. Common goldfish are long and narrow, and they have a single tail. They swim very fast. They can compete with the koi for food without getting bullied around too much, and they prefer lower temperatures. These commons are obviously very happy in my pond as they are growing at a terrifying rate. Cheap little common goldfish are, ironically, the goldfish most likely to be kept in a little bowl or something, even though they really should be in a pond. It's the fancy goldfish that have been bred for life in aquariums. That didn't stop me from trying to keep fancy goldfish in the pond. Nothing too expensive, but I did test runs with cheap pet store fancies, and not a single one survived more than a week or so. I'm not totally sure what happened to all of them, but one I found stuck between some rocks, which was sad, so I stopped trying. So that's when I got to thinking about building a second, safer pond. Fancy goldfish can really only bowl with the bumpers up, if you know what I mean. Separately, I'd been thinking of ways to stabilize temperatures in the greenhouse that I also inherited from the prior owner. Prefabbed up in Ohio Amish country, I see. I can manage temperature in here pretty effectively by opening and closing windows and the Dutch door, but one thing greenhouse people mention is that you can use a large tank of water as a heat sink. Even in the winter, tons of solar energy enters this greenhouse, and it's trapped in the form of heat thanks to, you guessed it, the greenhouse effect. And more of that heat can be stored for the cold of the night if you have a whole lot of water in there, with water's, enormous density and heat capacity. So I figured, eureka! I can put in a big tank of water to be a heat sink, and I can grow some aquatic plants for fun, and I can have fish. Huge, very well-built anodized aluminum troughs are available at lots of US box stores now, not just from farm equipment suppliers, so I bought one. I put in a base layer of soil across most of the bottom, not all of it. I want to keep some areas of open sand, but everywhere you see plants, there's soil capped with sand. George and Gracie absolutely love sifting through the sand for food. I love how it kind of looks like they're sneezing or huffing and puffing angrily. Oh, over here, this is duckweed that I'm growing in a pot. I feed that to them too. Keeps them regular. But back in the trough, I built them a shelf where they can hide if they feel threatened. I planted a bunch of plants, but I may need even more. They're still adjusting. We'll see how big they grow. Though probably the easiest way to do a container pond would be to just fill it up with potted bog plants. I left this umbrella palm in the pot it came in. It's probably full of beneficial bacteria, and I have to constantly prune it back. It grows so happily. Just think of all the fish poop this plant is pulling out of the water to sustain all that growth. I do nonetheless run a canister filter on this tank, which I hid under the floor, along with the pump for the 2 air stones. I also built up a central column of bricks under there to support the weight of the tank. Beginning aquarists often fail to take into account how incredibly heavy water is, and then sploosh. Anyway, I might even experiment with taking the canister filter out of the system there, because the water parameters are just so great with all the plants and everybody's really happy and healthy. We'll see. Goldfish are notorious poop monsters. It is nice that my filter has a built-in heater, which will help me to maintain a constant 72 Fahrenheit in here, which is a good compromise temperature for the goldfish and my more tropical cleanup crew of bottom feeders and algae eaters. Yes, you're normally not supposed to keep cory cats with goldfish because the goldfish could eat them and choke, but I think ranchus are just too slow. I've never seen one even try for one of the cories, but there's a first time for everything. Speaking of the heater, I did have a little whoopsie. I turned it on for the first time not long ago and I didn't get the heat setting correct, and it got way too warm way too fast, which tricked the little goldfish's bodies into thinking that it had been winter and now it's spring, which means time to breed. So I came in here and I saw what looked like fighting, like really vicious gladiatorial combat between those two fish in here. And then I quickly realized that it was Gracie who was doing all the instigating. Gracie just kept ramming George with that big giant head. And then I thought, oh no, see, they were both supposed to be female goldfish, even though one is named George and the other Gracie. They were both supposed to be females because I didn't want to have to worry about breeding behavior because that can really stress the females. But I guess the dealer did not sex Gracie properly, which can be hard to do, so I understand that. I'm not angry about it. But yeah, so Gracie is a boy, and what Gracie was trying to do, whether Gracie understood it or not, was to push the eggs out of George's belly. That's why Gracie kept ramming George. And I wasn't quite sure what to do. I got the temperature back down in there, and eventually Gracie seemed to get what he wanted because he calmed down. And yeah, no, there's not going to be baby fish because goldfish have no parenting instincts. They'll just eat the eggs. In fact, I think they already have. Anyway, since I'm sure people will ask, no, I don't think this tank is too small for George and Gracie. They're slow, delicate fish bred for life in aquaria. They basically need a padded cell. I reckon it's more important that they have an interesting environment with lots of nooks and crannies to explore, which they do. I never see them do any nervous pacing. They always look very interested and busy exploring for food or socializing with each other. That said, I may upgrade them to a bigger trough at some point. What I want to do is just try this for at least a full year. See if I'm able to maintain stable temperature and water parameters, see how the plants do, and then we might upgrade. With a bigger trough, I could do some real aquaponics. Right now, I just use old fish water to feed my potted plants in here, but real aquaponics is where you farm food plants with their roots directly in circulating nutrient-rich fish water. You can simultaneously raise fish to eat, and it becomes a virtuous cycle of delicious, sustainable food production. But I will not be eating my goldfish for two reasons. One, they're very expensive to import, and two, they probably would taste really bad. They may be big, but fish have to be like absolutely huge to get much meat at all off of them. You'd get like button-sized fillets off of these fish. Plus, they've been bred for looks, not for eating, so they're apparently very bony. They'd probably taste kind of muddy because the diet you feed goldfish is not the kind of food that you feed to fish that you're planning to eat. And if a bad influence in your life ever dares you to swallow a goldfish whole, live and wriggling as it goes down your throat, well, keep in mind that there are documented cases of human salmonella infections coming from fish tanks. Anyway, that is my greenhouse fish trough. Thanks for letting me show it off to you. I tell you, of all the things I've done since my career took off thanks to your viewership, building and managing this tank has been the most fun. In here, I really feel like, okay, now I am finally really enjoying the fruits of my success and good fortune. And I thank you very much for that.